Greetings from Guanacaste, Costa Rica, and welcome to another live Wednesday night Costa Rica chat with Costa Rica Matt. Our main subject tonight is buying a home pre-construction here in Costa Rica, which a lot more people are having to do these days because there simply isn't existing inventory on the market. But wait, there's more. We have not one, but two couples joining us for interviews tonight. First of all, we're going to be joined by Zach and Ariana, who've ventured all over Costa Rica. They're going to play a fun little game about their Costa Rica travels so far. And at the end of our episode tonight, we're going to have the exciting introduction of Shelly and Jason, who are considering beginning this pre-construction home building process as we speak. They are in town looking at the possibility of initiating a project, and they're people who have volunteered to be on my channel as we go through a construction project and give us updates all along. So we'll get to bring in Shelly and Jason later. When we come back from the intro, we're going to have Zach and Ariana. Thanks very much for joining us. As always, my name is Costa Rica Matt Rosensteel, owner-broker of Latitude 10 Realty here in Playa Junquial, Guanacaste. Thanks so much for tuning in and stay tuned. Zach and Ariana have traveled all over Costa Rica. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
They don't always dress up like this. They're actually, lots of times they do. And I remember we have to pull the mic closer here. They're headed out tonight for a big night in the town. What are your plans?
Well, it's our final night here on this trip. And so we are going to a special dinner at
Via Divina.
Via Divino.
Thank you.
Which is a landmark in our area up in Playa Negra. Very much one of the restaurants. It's Michelin rated. The chef has worked at the White House. It's an incredible spot. So they're in for a real treat. Where have you been in Costa Rica and what have you seen?
Well, on this trip, we've done a lot on this coast in the Nicoya Peninsula. We went down to Nosara, San Juanillo, Playa Negra, Playa Ariana, and Junquial.
Playa Junquial. And they're here on their last night giving us their time. Thank you so much. Before they leave Costa Rica, we wanted to quiz them and see how well they know each other as a couple. Hopefully we'll have them back someday for something a little bit more in depth about their search. But tonight I asked them, how many? 4 questions? 4 questions to each of them, and they answered on the papers I have here in front of me. We're going to see who can guess the other person's answer to those questions and take home the grand prize, which is a bottle of pure raw Bees for Trees honey. This is harvested in our area and will be a great, hopefully, souvenir to take home for one of you two. The other one never gets to taste it. Anyhow, Ariana is a mayor's assistant, except I Googled you and it was, your title is city what? Oh no, it appeared with like city alderman or something, but anyway. Zach is a computer programmer. That's right. We're going to see the first question that I asked both of them. We're going to start with Ariana's answers to the questions and see how many Zach can get right. Okay. First of all, what was Ariana's favorite moment in this Costa Rica trip?
I am going to guess her favorite moment was one of the epic sunsets we saw on Playa Junquial. They just last forever. They have this crazy afterglow. We stayed the whole time.
I'm sorry, but that's very incorrect. And actually, Ariana gets a bonus point for this one. She wrote her favorite moment was meeting Matt. Let's go on to the next question on the polar opposite end of the spectrum. What do you think Ariana disliked the most about this trip to Costa Rica?
Yeah, that's a hard one. She loves Costa Rica. Disliked. I don't know, like going to Tamarindo, maybe. She had a.
Oh, that was a good one. That would have been good. Yeah.
Very good answer. There are folks who prefer the quieter areas, and Tamarindo wasn't a big hit. Actually, that's incorrect as well. She disliked when the fish was overcooked. And we're not going to mention who overcooked the fish. What kind of fish was it?
I don't even know.
Oh, yeah. You ordered something and
it was
overcooked fish. Well, we're 0 for 2, so not a good start for Zach on winning the honey tonight.
Pressure's on.
Now let's see favorite beach seen so far throughout Costa Rica and all of your travels.
Is that the one you answered?
I think we did it just on this trip. We did just on this trip.
Okay, just on this trip.
We modified the question a lot. I think on this trip it's San Juanillo.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
She loves San Juanillo for swimming. It's calm waters. And she mentioned Junquillal for the sunsets and the soft sand. So you actually got one. Way to go. 1 for 3 so far. Finally, when you move to Costa Rica someday, what is the one thing that Ariana would love to bring that she probably can't?
I mean, I don't know, your mushroom growing kit?
That's very funny. I almost wrote that.
We'll give him a half point for that because she almost wrote mushroom growing kit, but the answer was her friends, all of her friends.
All my friends.
So you got 1.5 there.
No, it would be cheesy.
No. Yeah. We will, I'm just dropping papers left and right here. So we'll give Zach 1.5 here to make it so that one of you is going to win here. Questions for you, answered by Zach. What was Zach's favorite moment on this trip?
I would think maybe watching the surf competition at Playa Aveana.
That would
Interesting.
Be a good guess.
That's funny. My kids and wife went to that. I couldn't make it.
Funny.
He actually said visiting 4 beaches in one day was his favorite. San Juanillo, Guiones, you hit Pitaya and Junquillal all in the same day?
Yeah.
It was a long day.
That was
It was a long
driving.
day.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
he
gonna say.
did a lot of driving.
Yeah, absolutely. Second, what does Zach dislike most about Costa Rica?
The dirt, driving on the dirt roads and the no.
Close. It's the midday heat that he really hates. It's March 16th tonight. We're in the middle of our dry season and the absolute hottest part, and the wind just stopped a week ago. We had nice breezes, and then these two came into town, and it just stopped. So, sorry. Midday heat is pretty brutal right now in March, and that's why you generally don't go sit outside at midday, you know?
No, it's true.
Favorite beach seen on this trip?
Was it Playa Aveana?
Yes. A point for Ariana. Playa Aveana is really special, and it's the scene, you know, the place where we have Lola's, an iconic beachfront restaurant. Finally, what's the one item that Zach will wish he could have brought to Costa Rica?
I think he's going to say Moo, our cat, even though I say we can bring her.
Unfortunately, he said probably my road bike.
Oh, wow.
Which actually, leave the cat, you know. Cats can come. They get along very well here, and they're not too difficult. But I'm afraid, Ariana, that leaves you with only 1 point, and Zach with 1.5. So he'll be taking home, again, this bottle of pure raw Bees for Trees honey. Visit beesfortrees.org to find out more about the project. Before you two head off to date night, what advice would you give people? Where should they visit? What's the one thing that they should come and do in Costa Rica?
Oh, wow.
This is a surprise question.
Yeah.
To be very honest, I think one of the coolest things I've done was when I was in Puerto Viejo on the Caribbean coast. I did a whitewater rafting trip on the Rio Paquera, and it was also a transportation back to San Jose, which I needed to do to fly home. So it's like
so cool.
such a great way to, because you're spending a long time on a bus anyway, you may as well incorporate this amazing river trip.
Awesome. The Rio Paquare.
Yeah.
That started from Puerto Viejo, or
So it's kind of in between, but they pick you up at either end actually, and can bring you, and you do whitewater rafting day.
That's really cool. I've only done it with student groups in Costa Rica, and haven't even begun to think of ever doing it again. But that reminds me that there's whitewater rafting here too.
Yeah, it was a very cool trip.
Well, that's awesome. Do you guys think you'll be back in Playa Junquial someday?
I do. It's a pretty great spot. It's so close to everything.
Awesome.
So many great beaches.
Yeah. And we're gonna have to come visit you.
I was gonna say we're gonna have to continue doing more trivia games, whatever we can. It's been wonderful showing you around the community, of our brief stint out and getting to know you too. Hope you have an absolutely spectacular dinner. I could make some recommendations, but publicly I don't want to talk about which dishes I like there. But anyway, I really appreciate you two dropping in. You know, one of my favorite YouTube viewers out there, Mary Katherine. Hi, Mary Katherine. She would always come by the office when I was about to broadcast, and she would say to her parents, Paul and Steph, "It's sad because Matt's just talking to himself." She's, a younger YouTube viewer out there. Well, Mary Katherine, I finally have some friends. Isn't that awesome? And they might come back. I've asked them and they said they might. Anyway, yeah.
Well, when we move here, we'll hang out all the time.
Absolutely. You can meet Mary Katherine too.
Sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for joining us.
So much,
Enjoy your
Matt.
dinner, and congratulations
not
to the
to
big
me.
winner tonight of our trivia edition. We'll transition back here, folks. We'll let them head on out.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. Do a super professional transition here to the information for the evening. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate that. We're talking about the process of buying a pre-construction home here in Costa Rica. Later, I'm going to be joined by Jason and Shelley, folks who are down in this area considering the opportunity to start a pre-construction project. And this time, I promise we actually have a moment of beach zen, a good 2-minute video for everybody to enjoy some absolutely spectacular late afternoon Playa Junquial sunset time. So let's start tonight with our topic on pre-construction projects. We're going to start with the basics. How do they work here in Costa Rica? We'll go over due diligence, how to make sure that you can understand what you're getting yourself into. We're going to try and touch on how you can ensure that a developer is going to finish your home. And finally, we're going to go over some pitfalls of the process and my suggestions for avoiding them. As always, if you haven't clicked that red subscribe button, please do so, and I will be eternally grateful. In Costa Rica, the basics of buying a pre-construction home usually start with a legal process where a buyer will actually close on an undeveloped lot while simultaneously signing a construction contract with a developer. That's the nuts and bolts of it. You'll see here in Guanacaste right now that there is truly little existing home inventory, and that more people than ever, I think, more expats relocating, are going into these pre-construction projects as a way to get their ideal home down here in Guanacaste, given that there's almost nothing available on the market. When you meet with different developers throughout Costa Rica, one of the things that I think stands out and really defines some of the projects you see here is that developers in Costa Rica can frequently be prone to a bit of hyperbole. You will see designs, all kinds of amazing renderings of what a future development might look like. And if you look at the history of Guanacaste, you know that a lot of times these things don't work out. In other words, there are a lot of people who have been investing into properties here, and you find that there are half-finished homes, half-finished developments, and that a lot of times developers here are able to get really away with painting a picture of a future project that isn't gonna really happen. Why does that happen? Well, you'll see in many cases, Guanacaste has had developers that had no financial capacity to survive a downturn or to be able to keep their sales program alive when the market was not hot. And in fact, maybe 6 out of 10 developers went bust back in 2009 or 2010. That's not an actual number. I'm just saying a large percentage of developers went bust because they didn't have the financial capacity to really finish a project, even though they were presenting to people that absolutely they were going to be able to do so. So in general, pre-construction purchases in Costa Rica are a lot riskier than other places in the world. You do have that component that developers often cannot fulfill their vision. You also find that contracts here and the legal system supporting the enforcement of contracts is not as rock solid as people feel it is in the US or Canada. And so oftentimes you see that, people are unable to enforce specific terms in Costa Rica when in other parts of the world you would have a better backing. Courts here are super slow. You can count on basically getting caught up in a bureaucratic nightmare if you try to sue somebody or go after that developer if things don't work out than the way you planned. And finally, another reason that pre-construction projects here are riskier than other places in the world is simply the lack of repetition and volume. There are very few developers in Costa Rica that have successfully implemented numbers of neighborhood projects, for example. In our area, you would find that many of the developers pursuing a neighborhood, are doing this only for the second or third time. And when you do find developers with more experience, the building companies here and literally the volume of homes that are built can be far fewer than some of the spec neighborhoods you see in the US or Canada. So whereas you might have a neighborhood with dozens and dozens of homes being built all at once in the US to the same spec with the same framing, everything done so that they can repeatedly do this. Here, that's a very, very rare thing to see. And in fact, I would say that every contractor has a lot fewer homes under their belt. So it definitely opens up all kinds of risk. And yes, if you're reading online and going into social media groups for Costa Rica, I'm sure you've seen horror stories of people entering into pre-construction projects and not getting what they wanted nor paid for. So let's talk a little bit more about how you can go through this process in an intelligent way to not end up in one of those situations. How can you do your due diligence to find out whether a project is legitimate? And this is something that I need to emphasize is necessary in Costa Rica. You might see a developer in the US and be able to make certain assumptions that, well, if they have this project underway and if they have all of their permitting and if they've been able to do this, then chances are that developer is actually a solid company, or at least that they've got huge infrastructure to be able to support the development of their project. In Costa Rica, you might see a lot of absolutely beautiful sales presentations and some very impressive materials. But when you look at what's actually going on with the company in the background, many times you'll find that you can't make those same assumptions as to their capacity to actually implement the project. In some circumstances, it can be very surprising to find out, so many developments here in 2000 through 2008 were started with the concept of being able to fund future infrastructure and amenities with the sales of their first 5, 10, 15 lots and going forward. That is more common than you can imagine here in Costa Rica, where the whole business development, the success of a community and the success of a developer depends on them being able to see that cash flow coming in. Obviously, there are situations like that in other countries as well, but it's especially acute here because there's almost no financial resources, the kinds of loans that people have access to down here. It's very hard to access capital. And when you do, it's going to be a private investor who wants to be involved in a project. And you'll see that very often developers can't simply find money when they need it, or that they don't have huge volumes of money to be able to get a project through a rough spot. So if you're trying to judge the legitimacy of a project, here your resources, just as they often are going to be local testimonials and really a web of information that you're not going to find necessarily on the internet. You might find, if you Google many of the projects offering pre-construction homes, all you're going to find is the sales website, perhaps a little bit more information, but you're never going to find the kinds of background information on the company, the principals. There's a lot less data out there on the internet. And here there's a ton of data available on the ground. Most of the communities in Guanacaste, where I live, are small enough that any developer, any contractor is going to have a huge reputation in the community where they've worked, whether it's positive or negative. And you as a potential buyer can do yourself a huge service by talking to as many people in town. And this can be realtors, lawyers, other people that have built homes, and really anybody that's got a good bead on what's happening in the community. Because again, these communities are absolutely microscopic relative to some big US cities, and you're going to probably find out everything you'd ever want to know about a developer or a contractor, a builder, just by asking around town, their neighbors, etc. If you are looking at a development and you start making these inquiries around town, and you find that the developer has almost no reputation, that is one of the biggest red flags you can have here in Guanacaste. Because yes, as I mentioned, developers are moving around. They don't necessarily have tons of projects under their belt. And you might see that relatively new firms are starting very ambitious projects. And while they might have, renowned expertise and all kinds of great things on paper, nothing guarantees the success of a development more than if the people driving it, or the, contractors, the companies, nothing's going to guarantee that their quality more than their local reputation here in Costa Rica. We don't have the Better Business Bureau. We don't have Angie's List or a lot of resources that you could use to verify the reputation of somebody in other places. What we do have is small town gossip, huge amounts of it, and really relationships between everyone. You would probably find right now that in Tamarindo, you could ask questions about the developers behind some of the major projects, and everybody in town has done business with many of them for decades. When we talk to Jason and Shelley later, we'll touch on the fact that that's absolutely what you want to see. And really, it's a key component to understanding what you're doing here in Costa Rica. Long story short, don't just assume because they have a nice sales website and very impressive literature that they're actually great developers. So let's talk about how you can ensure that your pre-construction home gets finished rather than ending up in one of those nightmares scenarios. I didn't really touch on the mechanics of how things work here, but the key term is escrow, and the very important use of a third party to manage your money who will not release funds to a developer until that third party determines it's the right time to do so. So when you enter into these pre-construction contracts here in Costa Rica, as I mentioned at the beginning, in most circumstances, you're going to close on your lot legally, pay them what the lot price is, and actually sign papers to transfer title to your name or your company's name, simultaneously then signing a construction contract and moving forward with your pre-construction home. First of all, it's absolutely critical that you aim for those projects where you do get to close on the property before moving forward with construction. You will see formulas where developers want you to continue to pay tranches and tranches as the home develops, but really in physical space-time, you still don't own the property, and instead, you're only going to close at the very end of the process, which is an absolutely gigantic risk. Closing on the property initially means that even if something happens and, let's say development stops somewhere along the road, you still have your property, whereas in the other situation, you don't. Next, your due diligence is truly the way to avoid this. And I can't emphasize enough that the work prior to signing your contract on figuring out who you're doing business with and their capacity to achieve the development is really the absolute most important step in this process. Many people will come down to Costa Rica having seen these sales pitches. You can build your dream home. We've got renderings. They'll offer fly and buy programs where they even reimburse your airfare to come down. When you're looking at these potential developments, one of the easy ways, and I forgot to touch this back in my due diligence section, first of all, there will be clear signs as to how things are progressing in your project. And if you come down and hear from a developer that, yeah, we have 50 of these units already sold, and you see maybe 3 or 4 under construction, you should be willing to listen to those voices in your head saying that there's a little something fishy here. You can also ask them for the legal information for a property. And one of the things that I insist on doing in this sort of situation is looking at all of the titles within a project and seeing how many of those have actually closed compared to how many of those the developer is stating have closed. You can walk through projects frequently and see all kinds of sold, reserved, under agreement, signs that are often placed there really just to create a sense of urgency in clients touring around. I can't quantify how often that happens, but I would say that every single project in, Guanacaste at one point or another has tried to motivate sales just a little bit by that sort of trick. Maybe the developer gave a lot to their son, or they eventually plan to build on 3 lots themselves. And so they put sold signs on those lots to try and create that sense of urgency. Oh, lots of people are buying in here as you're touring. if you have an experienced realtor working for you as your buyer's representative, that person can go into the National Registry with the legal information of the development that's happening and verify exactly what's happened so far in terms of these closings. And I really, nothing is more powerful than coming armed with the knowledge, sitting down at the table with developers and saying, we've looked at the 56 titles of this project. We do see that 3 have closed, but the others didn't even, you can see whether or not they have pending sales contracts that are applying to the title. So you can do that legal due diligence. You can run around as much as possible collecting testimony from locals. You can have your buyer's agent who should have immense experience in your community, really, in order to avoid that you end up losing your investment here. It's all about the work before you actually sign that contract, because to be honest, once you've signed it, if you've signed it with the wrong people and money starts flowing, there's not much you can do. You've already gone too far. And even those controls, the tranches of money that don't get released, those can be not enough to make sure that your project is successful. Quickly, to go back and give sort of a standard payment regimen you might see here. In smaller projects, you might often see in Costa Rica that there are only 4 or 5 progress payments. You'll have to make a deposit in order to get the permitting going, the design, and finalize everything. That might be a 10% deposit, and then equal tranches as progress is made, when the foundation is completed, when the roof goes on, etc. As I mentioned, you might meet developers who want to provide you with both your escrow service provider and attorneys to handle this process. In fact, you'll often see that the developers that maybe you should worry a bit more about are the ones who say, don't worry, we have a world-class team to handle every aspect of your purchase. We have a sales agent, we have an attorney, we have the building inspectors, we have an escrow agent. Everything is in-house and packaged to make look convenient and easy for a buyer, but really you're ceding control and you're hoping that they also have your best interests at heart. It's entirely false that a seller can force you to work with one attorney or another. In Costa Rica, the buyer can choose the public notary who handles the purchase. It's also false that they can force you to work with a particular escrow agent or sales agent. You're welcome to find your own buyer's agent and really try and get someone to go to bat for you, picking apart the project, trying to look at all of the guarantees they're making, etc. Because I guarantee you, if you completely work with the people selling you the property, their conflict of interest at one point or another is going to supersede how great of people they are, and they're not necessarily going to make decisions that are in your best interest. So isolate yourselves somewhat if you can, whether it's through picking your attorney, your agent. Don't necessarily agree to just completely sign on to what a developer is suggesting, because it's false that you have to work with them, and it's absolutely true that you can find your own providers to really look out for your best interests. Let's talk about some of the other pitfalls of the process besides, the whole thing itself. One of the things that you will see in Costa Rica, obviously, is that a final product will be quirky, to say the least, or it will have some issues. Light switches get installed wrong. All manner of small problem can end up affecting the quality of your home. Because when push comes to shove, a lot of these projects where a developer's building and building and building, they're not necessarily hiring labor that's flawless at every single thing. First of all, one of the things in looking at that fact that you're going to get a quirky final product, honestly, I don't have too much of a remedy for it. You obviously will have a final payment that should be sitting in escrow that doesn't get dispersed until you're absolutely satisfied with your product. Obviously, that gets tricky because you're 90% into the house. You want to close on it and move in and start using it. You might only have 10% of their money to leverage in order to get some of these little things fixed. And you might often find that getting the little adjustments, those fine details in Costa Rica, unless you're at an absolutely high-end development with some of the best possible contractors, I would suggest that your expectation should be a bit lower coming into the process. If you're somebody who needs everything in a house to be absolutely perfect, this whole thing might not be for you, because buying in Costa Rica, and especially in a pre-construction project, you're definitely going to have to accept a few imperfections. And if you're not willing to accept them, yes, you can hold off closing on your home. You can try and leverage that last payment as much as possible. But there will be situations where a developer, the contractor, doesn't want to make those absolute last adjustments, or, for example, they think you're being unreasonable, and at some point you have to decide to either close or withdraw. But I do suggest expecting to be a bit more flexible and not as upset if small things are wrong. Another big pitfall in Costa Rica, developers promise all kinds of future common amenities. We're someday going to have a massive pool here. My neighborhood was going to have an electric car charging station. We don't even have a gate anymore. There's developers will go on and on about this vision: a community center, tennis courts, horseback riding, mountain biking. Again, this is another area where you don't have too much recourse to be able to ensure that they come through on these promises. And in Guanacaste, this is another area where you'll see not always do they come through on these promises, to say the least. And so my suggestion in dealing with developers of these sorts of projects, if they're promising future amenities, clubhouses, whatever they may be, I would really purchase the property based on the expectation that what is there is what you're buying. Again, it's not a solution to enforce and make sure that they come through on their promises. Rather, it's a strategy when you're approaching a neighborhood. Look at it for what it is and what it will realistically be once you've purchased and once they've made their initial sales. If they're promising absolutely pie in the sky, wonderful amenities, you can smile and say, that sounds wonderful, and I can't wait to see it. But if you don't think that the neighborhood is worth it without the pool, don't buy until there's a pool, or until you can see it going in, because those intangibles here, I would only include them as part of the value of a house once they were there. If somebody says, yeah, we're going to do all this, thank you very much, I look forward to seeing it. But then in your mind, evaluate the property for what it is, and not necessarily what it would be if all of those incredible amenities that they're describing actually come in to, if they're going to, anyway, lost my train of thought completely on that one as I was looking at my notes here. A final pitfall, that you're going to see with construction in Costa Rica in general is that frequently the quality isn't going to live up to what you hope, or, if you're coming from the US or Canada, where most finished new homes are absolutely perfect. definitely there's the chance for disappointment. And here's, your only remedy to be honest and what you can do as a condition for releasing the progress payments. Make sure you get your building inspector in there to give you updates on progress and what's going on. And honestly, if you have a contractor friend here in Costa Rica, don't hesitate to have them give you their opinion of what's going to be built even before it's in the ground. I don't think you could do enough double checking and triple checking with independent sources what other people are saying here, because we don't have that level of standardization and really the level of quality when it comes to some contractors being able to deliver absolutely perfect homes. When the rubber hits the road, these contractors have to put bodies working on job sites every single day. And very often those contractors here, the employees working on a job site, are going to leave small issues that you find in your home down the road. As much as you want to and can afford to do it, I would send an independent inspector to check on building progress when needed. And really, you're not going to be able to provide a huge amount of guidance for the developer. It's only about understanding what's going on. And with those tranches, hopefully, if there's a major problem in step one, yes, you do have the opportunity to pull the brakes right then. Your inspector goes out and says, I see this is laid out wrong, or they find a major flaw. Don't wait until the home is finished to send in a building inspector. And once again, definitely do not trust that they're going to have an inspector as part of the team to go through on your behalf. Get your own person absolutely to do it. As I promised, tonight is a special night because I have not just my first guests, Ariana and Zach, but we have real live human beings here who are considering entering into a pre-construction contract for a home in Tamarindo themselves. Jason and Shelly, how's it going?
Good. We're excited to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, they're only about 30 minutes away from me as the crow flies, but they're in Tamarindo right now. Would you two give us an overview of your family? Why are you looking in Costa Rica, and what's your dream here?
Yeah, well, we're from Seattle, Washington originally, excuse me, and we're looking to move down with our 2 young children and really just relocate long-term to Costa Rica. Like a lot of people with COVID, our work went remote, and we're both able to stay remote. And so a sort of long-term pipe dream of raising our kids abroad became more realistic. And we decided to try and make it happen. So we started looking for property kind of preliminarily about a year ago, and initially weren't planning on buying something immediately, but the rental market is so competitive, especially for something large enough for a family of 4.
Yeah.
So now we've become more and more interested in just purchasing something right away to make our move.
Yeah. It's wonderful for us real estate agents that this phenomenon is happening. The literal, like the evaporation of rental inventory. You see people for whom 5 years ago, there would have been no reason to buy. And now it makes economic sense because they'd have to pay so much for a rental, or they wouldn't be able to find a comfortable one. Earlier, I was talking about the lack of inventory in the market. You've been doing a lot of research, and in fact, you came to me with the idea that we're thinking about a pre-build. Tell me about your search through the inventory and sort of what looked promising and how that went.
Yeah, I think that we landed on the pre-build in part because of what inventory was available. So especially in Tamarindo, where it's been the sort of nucleus of our search. What we found was there's a lot of smaller places like non-family size houses, and then there was also a lot of vacation. houses, so places built specifically for rental, and the lack of the family home was pretty apparent when we started really doing our search.
Okay.
So that really pushed us towards looking at some of these pre-con options, because we could take something that had a really great design team, a really great structure, but then push it more towards, let's say, a family model versus a vacation
Mhm.
model.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, and it's also the shift that's happened in the market. We had very few families moving down here as a section of our buyers 5-10 years ago, and you guys are the fastest growing cohort for sure, because of the remote work, the private schools, and really the comfort level that people that Costa Rica offers now. So in looking at it, I wish I would have heard the term pre-con before starting, because I said pre-construction so many freaking times over the last half hour. What are your biggest concerns, in looking at the possibility of getting into a pre-build? What are you apprehensive about?
I think that the pitfalls that you name pretty well cover what we're concerned about. Navigating the kind of financial, legal, logistical landscape of the process is daunting. And we're really trying to go in as realistic, as grounded as we can, expectations set appropriately, doing our research, understanding, the way that these kinds of developments move, and which sort of offshoots you can get pulled down. So we're trying to be eyes open about it, and honestly working with a qualified, buyer's representative we're working with Matt, has made this whole process so much less stressful for us, because we feel like we have someone we can go and ask questions to maybe translate some of what we're being told by the developers that we've spoken to, or the properties, just to kind of get a sense of what to expect given what we're being pitched.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a completely off the wall question. Over the course of your search, how many developers would you estimate you've been in touch with so far?
Probably four
Okay.
or five,
yeah.
somewhere around there.
Okay.
Because we're kind of interested in this area of Guanacaste. There isn't an overwhelming abundance of options, but we've tried to be exhaustive in this region.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. The 4 is about the number you would find in a specific community. Like I was mentioning, there's not a absolutely huge number. So, and I was trying to look up the questions I was intending to ask you. If you have them in front of you, you're welcome to throw them back at me. What kinds of things you're specifically focusing on Tamarindo for your family? What sorts of things have drawn you specifically landing in the place that you're landing?
Yeah, I think the neat thing about when we took a trip earlier in the year and spent 8 weeks down here to really learn Costa Rica just in general. Well, I should say Guanacaste,
a
right?
tiny
sliver
piece
of Costa Rica,
but
we were pretty blind when we came in, so we spent a lot of time, and we went to a number of places and just started to hone in on what we really enjoyed, and I think what we found with Tamarindo was a few things. Like, we really enjoyed the upbeat atmosphere, and for us, we enjoyed the surf break. I mean, the beach is really great. It's one of the few places where your kids can swim at the same spot where 100 feet out, folks are surfing, right? And it's very safe. So that was probably one of the big, the sort of big clinchers, because there's an amazing number of beautiful beaches all down Guanacaste. But that particular factor was probably what drew us in.
Totally.
Area.
Yeah. And the school, proximity to a school that we were really excited about, and that we've, this will be a smaller town than we're used to living in, which is something we're really excited about, kind of increased sense of community, increased sense of knowing who's around you. But we also wanted to lean towards feeling like there were restaurant options, that we could kind of feel like we were amongst people, felt important to us too.
Totally. And it's a wonderful exercise there to look at the different comments. The husband says, the surf break is great and it's perfect beach, everything. Mom is concerned about school. But to their credit, Jason and Shelly have both brought this up a lot, that, their kids and getting them established happy at the La Paz is one of the top priorities. And, in another video, I was talking about families moving to Costa Rica, and really your limiting factor is going to be finding that school throughout the country. If you're looking from Panama up to Nicaragua, there are only a few clusters of private schools, and you've landed here where we've got plenty of them. Jason and Shelly have committed to coming on to YouTube to talk about their build as it goes through the process, which is really exciting because we get to hold a developer publicly accountable for the project.
I think you signed us up very well right there.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. We will be talking about how successful they are and how happy they are with their home, or we will be talking about how difficult it's been and the communicate. We'll see where things go from here. But given now that essentially once you've been on my channel, you will achieve celebrity fame. Have you two picked out your conflated celebrity name hashtag yet? Or is that still up in the air? Because I've got some ideas.
We've always liked jelly. That seems
Jelly.
If you want to do hashtag jelly, that would be fine.
Yeah. Hashtag jelly. Absolutely. We can do that. We'll look forward to having you back on, reporting on progress as we go through things. I really appreciate you joining me to introduce you to what will now be a growing audience of international fans. Do be ready, when you head out in Tamarindo tomorrow, wear your sunglasses, put on a face mask, because people will be looking for you. Do stay tuned to my channel to see progress updates from Jason and Shelly. I promised everyone that I would make up for last week where I didn't have a single gorgeous beach clip to include in my stream. We're going to do 2 minutes here at Playa Junquial watching my kids play in the surf to end our broadcast tonight. Thanks to Ariana and Zach. Thanks to Jason and Shelly. And more than anything, thanks to you, loyal viewers, for watching this Costa Rica chat with Costa Rica Matt. We'll see you next Wednesday night, live, 7 p.m. Costa Rica time, which is now 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, etc. Thanks again, Jason and Shelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.